Apple just released iOS 16.5.1 just over a month after the release of iOS 16.5. Now, along with this update, Apple also released iPadOS 16.5.1, watchOS 9.5.2, macOS Ventura 13.4.1, and for older devices, we got iOS and iPadOS 15.7.7, macOS Monterey 12.6.7, and macOS Big Sur 11.7.8. But in this video, we're mainly talking about iOS and iPadOS 16.5.1. Now, taking a look at the size of this update, you could see it came in relatively small at 260 megabytes on my 13 Pro Max. That size is small, which is expected for a double point update like a 0.5.1. Now, if we go ahead and check out the build number for this update, settings, general, about, we could see it is 20F75. And the modem firmware version is 2.70.01. All right, so now what's new here in iOS 16.5.1? And the first thing is a fix for Apple's Lightning to USB 3 camera adapter. So this is an official dongle from Apple that plugs into the Lightning port and gives you access to a USB-A port and another Lightning port. And this was completely broken in 16.5. 16.5 completely broke this dongle, pretty much made it useless, but now with 16.5.1, it is fixed and should work as expected. And you'll notice that Apple mentions that it fixes an issue that prevents charging with the Lightning to USB 3 camera adapter. And the reason the charging was so important is because that actually is what powered the USB-A port. That's what allowed the USB-A port to work at all. Because if it didn't charge, like if it doesn't charge, you get an error message that says that the adapter requires too much power to operate. So again, the dongle was pretty much useless after 16.5, but now that has been fixed here with this update. But easily the most important fix in this update, and the reason I think Apple actually pushed out this update before iOS 16.6, is because we have two pretty major security patches in this update. So there is a kernel bug and a WebKit bug that were being actively exploited. So these are zero-day exploits, and you can see here the impact of the kernel is that an app may be able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges. And they were aware of this issue being actively exploited against versions of iOS before iOS 15.7, but it did also go all the way up to 16.5 since it was just now patched. And that integer overflow was fixed with improved input validation. And then the other bug is a WebKit bug, and the impact was processing maliciously crafted web content may lead to arbitrary code execution. And again, Apple is aware that this issue may have been actively exploited, and this one does not mention any iOS version, so I would assume it was probably on the latest, like 16.5. But this was patched. The description says a type confusion issue was addressed with improved checks. So two exploits that could have been actively exploited out in the wild. That is always something to be aware of, and always something you want to make sure you update for just to keep your device as secure as possible. It's not likely that you would be impacted, but you never know. And then I do also want to mention for iOS 15.7.7 and iPadOS 15.7.7, you guys have the same two bugs that are patched here, kernel and WebKit, but there is an additional WebKit bug that has been patched. And this one was also being actively exploited. And you can see here, this is just up until 15.7. So that means, that 15.7.7 patches this, but this is not impacted on iOS 16. iOS 16 devices are not impacted by this specific WebKit bug with the CVE ending in 32435. And then if you have a Mac running macOS Ventura, you might also want to update that because 13.4.1 did address the same two bugs. So that kernel bug and that WebKit bug, both of those have been squashed with this latest bug fix update. Now, as far as performance goes, I would not expect anything major to be changed going from 16.5 to 16.5.1. However, I did still run a Geekbench 6 test, and you can see we scored a 2348 on the single core and a 5808 on the multi-core. So not a big difference in Geekbench scores. And again, I would not expect a difference really at all in performance going from 16.5 to 16.5.1. And the same goes with battery life. So if you're having bad battery life or good battery life on 16.5, that's likely to remain here in 16.5.1. These double point updates don't really ever touch the performance or the battery life. So with that being said, should you actually update to 16.5.1? And why exactly was this update pushed out if a 16.6 is following closely behind? So first off, should you update? I say yes, absolutely. If you're still on iOS 16, you should absolutely update and be on iOS 16.5.1. I don't see any reason not to, especially with the big security patches. Even if you don't use the camera adapter, it is necessary to update to keep your device as secure as possible. And if you're wondering if those bugs are impacting iOS 17, I would assume that they are, but the good thing about iOS 17 betas is that these patches will most likely be included in maybe not the next beta, but the beta after that. And that's also why Apple pushed out the 16.5.1 update instead of just waiting until 16.6, because these, security bugs are not really anything to mess around with, and Apple likes to release those as soon as possible. Even though we do have this right here, if we go in our settings, general software updates, we do have security responses and system files, but I guess since they did also have that additional bug to patch, that's why we did not just get a security response update over the air. And then finally, let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. And next up is iOS 16.6. I do not see Apple releasing a 16.5.2. I think we are going to see 16.6 within the next few weeks. If I had to guess, I would say on the week of July 10th, but it really could come either the week before or the week after that. I do not see it coming anytime after the week of the 17th, because we are still in the beta stages right now, but we're kind of wrapping up on those betas. So we should see 16.6 relatively soon. Now, if you're running the iOS 17 betas, we should see the second beta of iOS 17 for developers very soon, as early as this week, at the latest next week. And then as far as the public beta for iOS 17, I would expect the first public beta to most likely come on the same week as 16.6, which would be right here on July 10th. I would expect the first beta of iOS 17 public beta on July 10th, and maybe 16.6 later on in that week. But of course, keep it locked to the channel. Things can change. Things will change because Apple is Apple. And that's why you guys stay subscribed so you know when these updates get released. And also follow me on Twitter as well. You get more real-time updates over there. That link is down in the description below. But anyways, there you have it. That is iOS 16.5.1, a minor update with some pretty major security bug fixes. And of course, a patch rather, to the USB 3 camera adapter. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe for more iOS update videos just like this one. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.